3 times he counted the money. 3 times his hands trembled as he laid out the bills on the mahogany desk, each one a piece of her future being traded away. 3 times, Isabella Romano watched her father's fingers shake as he realized the truth, that selling his daughter to the most dangerous man in New York was the only way to keep them both alive. But when Dante Moretti saw her standing in the doorway of his office, rain dripping from her dark hair and defiance burning in her green eyes despite the terror underneath, something inside his chest cracked open. Something he thought he'd buried years ago alongside his first kill. If you want to discover how a debt of blood became a promise of forever, how a transaction turned into the kind of love that burns down empires, subscribe to the channel now. Leave a like if you believe that even in darkness, love can find a way to light the path forward. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening to this story from? Your presence here means everything. The rain fell like bullets against the windows of the Moretti estate, each drop a tiny explosion against the bulletproof glass that separated the world of normal people from the world Isabella was about to enter. The mansion loomed in the darkness of Long Island, all sharp angles and cold stone, surrounded by walls that were meant to keep people out, but would now keep her in. Her father's hand was ice cold in hers as they sat in the back of the black sedan. Vincent Romano had once been a proud man, a small business owner in Brooklyn, who made custom furniture with his own hands, who came home every night smelling of wood shavings and varnish, who danced with her mother in the kitchen while pasta sauce simmered on the stove. But her mother had been gone for 3 years now, taken by cancer that ate through their savings faster than it ate through her body. And the gambling debts that came after, the loans from the wrong people, the interest that compounded like a disease, those had eaten through everything else, including his dignity, including his daughter's freedom. Isabella was 24 years old. She had graduated with honors from community college, working 2 jobs to pay her way through. She dreamed of becoming a teacher, of having a small apartment in the city, of Sunday dinners with her father, where they'd laugh about her students, and he'd show her photos of his latest furniture pieces. Those dreams dissolved the moment 3 men in expensive suits came to the workshop and explained exactly how much Vincent owed, and exactly what would happen if he didn't pay. $200,000. It might as well have been 2 million. And then one of them, the one with the scar across his knuckles and eyes like a snake, had looked at Isabella as she brought her father lunch. He'd looked at her the way a butcher looks at meat, and he'd smiled. That's when her father made the deal. His daughter, untouched and obedient, in exchange for the debt forgiven. A transaction. A trade. A sale. The car stopped in front of massive iron gates that opened silently, like the mouth of some great beast swallowing them whole. Isabella's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Her father hadn't looked at her since they left Brooklyn, couldn't look at her. She wanted to hate him for this. Part of her did. But the larger part, the part that remembered him reading her bedtime stories and teaching her to ride a bike and crying at her graduation, that part understood. He was a drowning man grabbing for anything to keep his head above water. She just happened to be the rope. The front door opened before they even reached it. A woman stood there, older, somewhere in her 50s, with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and a black dress that looked like it cost more than Isabella's entire wardrobe. Her face was unreadable, professional, in a way that suggested she'd seen this exact scene play out before. "Mr. Romano," the woman said, her voice clipped and cold. "Mr. Moretti is waiting in his office. This way." They walked through hallways that felt like a museum. Original paintings on the walls, sculptures in alcoves, floors so polished Isabella could see her reflection in the marble. Everything was beautiful and cold and perfect. Nothing looked lived in. Nothing looked loved. The office was on the second floor, behind double doors of dark wood carved with intricate designs. The woman knocked twice, then opened the doors without waiting for an answer. Inside, sitting behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of black walnut, was Dante Moretti. Isabella had seen his picture in the newspapers. Everyone in New York had. The youngest Don in the city's history, only 32 years old, when he took over his family's operations after his father's assassination. The articles called him ruthless. They called him brilliant. They called him the Devil of Manhattan. But no photograph had prepared her for the reality of him. He was tall, at least 6'3", with shoulders that strained against his custom suit. His hair was black, pushed back from a face that looked like it had been carved by someone who understood the beauty of sharp edges. Strong jaw, high cheekbones, a nose that had been broken at least once and healed slightly crooked. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. They were dark, almost black, and they held something she hadn't expected. Intelligence. Yes. Danger. Absolutely. But also a bone-deep weariness, a kind of exhaustion that came from carrying too much weight for too long. He stood when they entered, moved with the fluid grace of a predator, all controlled power and coiled threat. His gaze swept over Vincent dismissively, then landed on Isabella and stopped. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Isabella felt his eyes on her like a physical touch, cataloging every detail. Her dark hair, still damp from the rain, falling past her shoulders. Her green eyes that refused to drop despite the fear making her knees weak. The simple black dress she'd worn because it was the only thing that seemed appropriate for being sold. The way she held herself straight, shoulders back, chin up, even though everything inside her was screaming to run. Something flickered across Dante's face. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition of something he hadn't expected to find. "You're Vincent Romano," Dante said finally. But his eyes never left Isabella. His voice was deep, rough around the edges like expensive whiskey. "Yes, sir," her father managed, his voice cracking. "I brought what we agreed." "This is my daughter, Isabella." Dante moved around the desk, each step deliberate and measured. He stopped a few feet away from her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and woody with an edge of spice. "Look at me," Dante said softly. Isabella realized her gaze had dropped to somewhere around his chest. She forced herself to meet his eyes again, to hold that dark stare, even though it felt like staring into the sun. Something in his expression shifted. The hardness cracked, just for a moment, and she saw something underneath. Something almost like pain. "How old are you?" he asked. 24, she answered, proud that her voice came out steady. "Do you understand why you're here?" Her jaw tightened. "My father owes you money. I'm payment." "That's not what I asked." Dante took another step closer. "Do you understand what this arrangement means? What I could do with you?" "Yes," Isabella said, even though her whole body was trembling now. "I understand perfectly. And you came anyway. What choice did I have?" Dante studied her for another long moment, then turned to her father. "Get out." Vincent's head snapped up. "Sir, I just wanted to—" "Get out!" Dante repeated, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "Before I forget, we have an agreement and put a bullet in your skull for what you've done to your own daughter." The older man fled. Actually fled, stumbling over his own feet in his rush to leave. Isabella heard his footsteps echoing down the hallway, getting fainter and fainter, until there was nothing but silence, and the sound of rain, and the thundering of her own pulse. She was alone with the Devil of Manhattan. And he was still watching her with those impossible eyes. "Sit," Dante said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs in front of his desk. "Please." The please surprised her. She sat, mostly because her legs were about to give out anyway. Dante moved back behind his desk, but he didn't sit. He poured 2 glasses of something amber from a crystal decanter, slid one across the polished surface toward her. "You look like you need this." "I don't drink." "You do now." His tone left no room for argument. Isabella picked up the glass, took a small sip, and immediately regretted it. The liquid burned down her throat like fire, making her cough. Dante's lips twitched. Might have been almost a smile. It was gone before she could be sure. "What did your father tell you about me?" he asked. "That you're dangerous. That you own half of New York. That people who cross you disappear." "All true." He took a drink from his own glass, swirling the liquid thoughtfully. "What else?" "That you always collect your debts." "Always." Dante set his glass down, leaned forward with his hands flat on the desk. The light from the lamp caught on a scar across his left hand, white against tanned skin. "Your father owed me $200,000. Plus interest. It's closer to 300 now. I don't have that kind of money." "I know. I work at a bookstore and tutor kids in math. I make maybe 30,000 a year. I know that too." "Then you know I can't pay you back. Not in money." His eyes held hers. "But that's not the arrangement your father made, is it?" Isabella's hands tightened around the glass. "No." He set down her whole drink in one swallow, felt it burn all the way down. "He offered me." "Yes." "Say it." Her chin lifted defiantly. "He offered me to you. To do whatever you want with. For as long as you want. Until you consider the debt paid." Something dangerous flashed in Dante's eyes. "And if I told you I wanted you in my bed tonight? Right now." Her stomach twisted, but she didn't look away. "Then I'd ask if you prefer the lights on or off." Dante recoiled slightly, as if she'd struck him. For several heartbeats, he just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then he did something she absolutely didn't expect. He laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was harsh and bitter, and carried the weight of too many years of seeing the worst of humanity. But it was genuine. "Cristo," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" Isabella heard herself ask. "Someone who'd cry, someone who'd beg, someone who'd already be broken." "I might be all of those things by tomorrow," she said honestly. "But right now, I'm just angry. At your father. At you. At myself. At the world." "Anger, I understand," Dante said quietly. "Anger keeps you alive." He moved around the desk again, but this time he leaned against it, arms crossed over his chest. It put him closer to her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "Let me tell you how this is going to work, Isabella. You'll live here, in this house. You'll have your own room, your own space. You'll eat meals with me when I'm home. You'll accompany me to events when needed. You'll be," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "under my protection." What does that mean exactly? It means no one touches you but me. No one threatens you. No one even looks at you wrong. My name becomes your shield, and in exchange, you belong to me. Isabella felt those words in her bones. Belong to him, like property, like a possession, like something bought and paid for, which she supposed she was. For how long? Until I say otherwise. And if I refuse, if I walk out that door right now, then your father dies before sunrise. His body will be found in the East River with the kind of damage that makes dental records necessary for identification. And you'll spend the rest of your life knowing you could have saved him. The casual way he said it, like he was discussing the weather, made ice form in Isabella's veins. This was the man behind the legend, the killer, the monster. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something else too. She saw a man who was tired of being a monster, who carried the weight of too many bodies, too many sins, who'd been shaped by violence until violence was all he knew how to speak. "I won't fight you," Isabella said quietly, "but I won't pretend to be happy about this either." "I don't want you to pretend anything," Dante replied. "I get enough lies from everyone else in my life. From you, I want—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with something. "Truth. Just truth. Even if it's ugly. Especially if it's ugly." "Why?" she asked. "Why does my truth matter? Because everyone else tells me what they think I want to hear." He pushed off the desk, turned to look out the rain-streaked window at the grounds below. They see the monster, and they're afraid. They see the power, and they want a piece of it. They see the money, and they become whatever they think will get them close to it. But you're here because you have no choice. You don't want anything from me except maybe to survive this. That's the most honest thing anyone's offered me in years." Isabella didn't know what to say to that, didn't know how to process this man who terrified her and somehow made her heart ache at the same time. The woman from earlier appeared in the doorway. "Maria will show you to your room," Dante said without turning around. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll discuss the rules in more detail." Isabella stood, her legs unsteady. She made it to the door before his voice stopped her. "Isabella." She turned back. He was looking at her now, and there was something raw in his expression. Something vulnerable that he couldn't quite hide. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly. "I know you don't believe that. I know you have no reason to trust me. But I need you to know I'm not going to hurt you." She wanted to tell him that he already had, that being bought like livestock had hurt her in ways she was still discovering, that knowing she was trapped here, that her freedom had been traded for her father's stupidity, that hurt more than any physical wound could. But she just nodded and followed Maria down the hallway. The room she was given was bigger than her entire apartment in Brooklyn. A massive four-poster bed dominated the center, dressed in silk sheets the color of cream. There was a sitting area with a couch and chairs, a desk by the window, a television mounted on the wall. Double doors led to a bathroom that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel, all marble and gold fixtures, and a bathtub deep enough to drown in. Another door revealed a walk-in closet already filled with clothes, women's clothes, in her size. Isabella ran her fingers over the fabrics, designer labels she'd only seen in magazines, dresses and blouses and pants and shoes arranged by color and style. Someone had prepared for her arrival. Someone had known she was coming and had stocked this room like a cage being prepared for a bird. She should have been grateful. The clothes she'd brought from home could fit in a single suitcase. These were worth more than she'd earned in 5 years. But all she felt was the weight of obligation settling over her shoulders, like chains made of silk. There was a knock at the door. Maria entered carrying a tray with tea and small sandwiches. "I thought you might be hungry," the older woman said, her voice softer than it had been downstairs. "You didn't eat dinner. I'm not hungry. You need to keep your strength up." Maria set the tray on the desk, turned to look at Isabella, with eyes that had seen too much. "This isn't my first time doing this, you know. Bringing a girl to this room, watching Mr. Moretti's latest acquisition settle in." Isabella's stomach turned. "How many others have there been?" Maria's expression didn't change. "You're the first." "The first," Isabella repeated, not understanding. "Mr. Moretti has never brought a woman here before, never made this kind of arrangement. The other families, yes, the Russians especially. But the Morettis," she paused. "Mr. Moretti's father used to say that women were a weakness that could be exploited, that bringing one into your home was like inviting a knife to your throat. So he never did. And Dante followed that rule, kept his relationships, if you could call them that, far away from this place. Until now. Why now? Isabella asked. Why me? Maria shook her head. That's not my question to answer. But I will tell you this. I've worked for the Moretti family for 30 years. I watched Dante grow up. I saw what this life did to him, what it made him become. And I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looked at you tonight. Like you were a miracle and a curse at the same time. Isabella sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. I don't know how to do this, how to be what he bought me to be. Then don't be anything, Maria said simply. Just be yourself. That seemed to be what startled him most. After Maria left, Isabella lay in the enormous bed and stared at the ceiling. The sheets smelled like lavender and something else. Something expensive she couldn't name. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving only the sound of water dripping from the eaves and the occasional rumble of thunder in the distance. She thought about her father, probably home by now in their tiny apartment above the workshop. Was he relieved? Guilty? Both. Was he already spending the money he'd saved by trading her away? She thought about Dante Moretti, somewhere else in this massive house, probably in his own bed. Did he sleep? Did monsters sleep? Or did they lie awake, counting their sins like some twisted version of counting sheep? And she thought about herself. About the girl she'd been this morning, who'd woken up in her own bed and made coffee in her own kitchen and worried about normal things like bills and lesson plans and whether the cute guy from the bookstore would ever ask her out. That girl was gone. In her place was something new, something she didn't have a name for yet. Someone who belonged to the devil of Manhattan. She must have eventually fallen asleep because she woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't remember and a moment of pure panic before reality came crashing back. The room, the house, the debt. Dante. There was a soft knock. Then Maria entered carrying more clothes. Mr. Moretti requests your presence for breakfast in 30 minutes, she said. These should fit. The outfit laid out was casual, but clearly expensive. Dark jeans that probably cost more than her rent, a soft cream sweater, leather boots. Isabella showered quickly, dressed, tried not to think about how perfectly everything fit. Someone had taken her measurements. Someone had studied her. The thought made her skin crawl. Mariah led her through the house, down a different set of stairs, to what appeared to be a breakfast room. All windows on one side, overlooking gardens that were just beginning to wake up for spring. A table was set for two, and Dante was already there, coffee in hand, reading something on a tablet. He looked different in daylight. The harsh edges were still there, but somehow softened. He wore dark pants and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with more scars. His hair was slightly damp, like he'd recently showered. When he looked up and saw her, something flickered in his expression. Relief, maybe, as if he'd been worried she might have tried to run during the night. "Good morning," he said. His voice was rougher than she remembered, like he hadn't used it much yet. "Morning," Isabella replied, taking the seat across from him. Maria appeared with food. Eggs, bacon, fresh bread, fruit. More food than Isabella normally ate in 2 days. She picked at it while Dante watched her. "You didn't sleep well," he observed. "How could you tell? The shadows under your eyes. The way you're holding yourself, like you're ready to bolt at any second." He set down his coffee. "I meant what I said last night. You're safe here. Safe is relative when you're talking to the man who owns you." Dante flinched slightly at that. Fair enough. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "We need to establish some ground rules. First rule, you have freedom within these walls. You can go anywhere in the house, use anything you want. The library, the gym, the pool. Consider it your home. This isn't my home. It's my prison. He didn't argue with that. Second rule, you don't leave the grounds without me or without my explicit permission and security. There are people who would hurt you to get to me, people who would use you as a weapon. Until everyone understands that you're under my protection, you're vulnerable. How long will that take? For everyone to understand. Depends on how quickly word spreads. A few weeks, maybe a month. He took a drink of coffee. Third rule, when we're in public together, you stay close to me. You don't talk to strangers. You don't accept drinks from anyone but me or my people. You don't go anywhere alone. What kind of public events? Dinners, charity functions, meetings occasionally. The families need to see that he paused, that you're with me, that you're mine. There was that word again. Mine. Like a brand. Like ownership. Isabella set down her fork, her appetite completely gone. And what about private? What happens when we're alone? What do you expect from me? Dante's jaw tightened. He set down his own coffee, leaned back in his chair. The morning light caught on his face, highlighting the sharp planes and shadows. Right now, I expect you to eat breakfast. To settle in. To stop looking at me like I'm about to pounce on you. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It's not. The silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Isabella waited. She'd learned early in life that sometimes silence was more powerful than questions. Dante seemed to be wrestling with something internal, his hands flexing and unflexing on the arms of his chair. Finally, he spoke. I'm not going to force myself on you, Isabella. That's not— He stopped, started again. My father built his empire on fear and violence. He took what he wanted when he wanted it. Women, money, power, lives. It didn't matter. If he desired it, he took it. And the men who followed him did the same. The old ways, they call it. Traditional. But it's just brutality dressed up in family honor. He stood, moved to the windows, his back to her. I watched what that did to people. The women who came and went from this house when I was growing up. The broken look in their eyes. The way they flinched at loud noises. How they disappeared into themselves until there was nothing left but a shell going through the motions. I swore I'd never become that. Never be that. So what are you saying? Isabella asked quietly. I'm saying that I won't touch you unless you want me to. This arrangement, it's not about me using you. It's about— He turned to face her, and there was something desperate in his eyes. I don't actually know what it's about yet. Your father offered you as payment. I accepted because seeing you in that doorway did something to me that I can't explain. You looked at me without fear and without calculation. Just pure defiance and anger and honesty. Do you know how rare that is in my world? So you bought me because I was honest. He laughed, that same bitter sound from last night. When you say it like that, it sounds insane. Maybe it is insane. Maybe I've finally lost whatever grip on sanity I had left. But you're here now, and I'm trying to figure out how to do this without destroying you in the process. Isabella stood as well, moved closer to him. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to make him look at her. You want to know what I think. Always. I think you're lonely, she said bluntly. I think you're surrounded by people who want something from you, who fear you, or use you, or both. I think you've spent so long being the monster everyone expects you to be that you've forgotten how to be anything else. And I think seeing me, someone who had no choice but to be honest, because I had nothing left to lose, made you remember that there could be something different. Something real. Dante stared at her, his expression unreadable. You're right, he said finally. About all of it. Does that change anything? No, Isabella admitted. I'm still trapped here. You still own me according to the laws of your world. My freedom was still traded for money. But maybe if we're both honest about what this is, it doesn't have to be as terrible as it could be. What do you want it to be? Dante asked. I don't know yet. What do you want it to be? He stepped closer. And this time, Isabella didn't step back. The space between them was charged, electric. I want, he started, then stopped. Started again. I want someone who sees me. Not the Don, not the killer, not the devil of Manhattan. Just me. The man underneath all the blood and scars and sins. I want someone I don't have to perform for. Someone I don't have to lie to or manipulate or impress. I want, he lifted his hand. Stopped just short of touching her face. I want what I saw in your eyes last night. That fire, that strength, that refusal to break. Can I? He asked, his hand still hovering near her cheek. Isabella's heart was racing. Every instinct screamed at her to say no, to maintain distance, to protect herself. But there was something in his eyes, a vulnerability that called to something in her. She nodded, barely a movement. His fingers brushed her cheek. Feather light. His skin was warm, rough with calluses. The touch lasted only a second before he pulled back, but it left her skin tingling. You're beautiful, he said quietly. That's not why I'm here, I know. But you are. The moment stretched between them, fragile as spun glass. Then Dante stepped back, the walls coming up again. Finish your breakfast. I have business to attend to this morning. Marco will be stationed outside your room. If you need anything, tell him. He left before she could respond, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Isabella stood there for a long moment, her hand pressed to her cheek where he'd touched her, trying to understand what had just happened, trying to understand why her heart was still racing, trying to understand why part of her had wanted him to keep his hand there longer. The rest of the morning passed slowly. Isabella explored the house, Maria following at a discreet distance. The place was enormous, room after room of expensive furniture and artwork that probably cost more than small countries. But it all felt empty, like a museum, not a home. The library caught her attention. Floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with books, real books, leather-bound and well-worn. She pulled one out, surprised to find notes in the margins. Someone had actually read these. Dante, Maria said from the doorway, seeing her surprise. He reads voraciously. Always has. It's how he learned to speak 6 languages, how he can quote philosophy and poetry alongside discussing the most efficient ways to move product through the port. What else does he do? Isabella heard herself ask, when he's not being a crime lord. Maria smiled slightly. He plays piano, though he thinks no one knows. He has a punching bag in the gym that he destroys regularly. He donates anonymously to 3 different children's hospitals and a women's shelter. She paused. He's more complicated than people think. That evening, Isabella was reading in the library when Dante appeared in the doorway. He was dressed differently now, all black. And there was something harder in his expression. Something that reminded her exactly who and what he was. I have to go out, he said. Business. I'll be back late. Marco and 3 others will be here. You're safe. Okay, Isabella said, because what else could she say? Dante lingered in the doorway, seeming to want to say something else. Finally, he just nodded and left. Isabella heard cars starting, engines rumbling, then silence. She was alone in the monster's house. She tried to keep reading but couldn't focus. Her mind kept circling back to this morning, to the way Dante had looked at her, the way his touch had felt, the things he'd said about wanting someone who saw him. She shouldn't care, shouldn't feel anything for the man who'd bought her. But humans were complicated creatures. and trauma and kindness got tangled up in ways that didn't make sense. It was past midnight when she heard the cars return. She'd moved to her room by then, was sitting by the window watching the grounds. She saw Dante get out of the SUV, saw the way he moved, stiff and careful, saw the way his men hovered around him. Something had happened. She should have stayed in her room, should have pretended to be asleep. Instead, she found herself in the hallway, then at the top of the stairs, watching as Dante dismissed his men and started up toward his own room. That's when she saw the blood. It was dark against his black shirt, spreading from somewhere near his ribs. He was holding his side, his face pale, jaw clenched against pain. Their eyes met across the distance. For a moment, neither moved. Then Isabella was rushing down the stairs before she could think about why. "You're hurt," she said, reaching him. "It's nothing. That's not nothing." "Let me see. Isabella, I'm fine. I used to be a nursing student," she said, surprising herself with the memory. "Before I had to drop out to help with my mom's medical bills." "Let me see." Something in her tone made him stop arguing. He let her guide him to the library, to the couch, helped him carefully remove the jacket, then the shirt. The wound was a gash across his ribs, long but not deep. A knife, probably. It had stopped bleeding but needed cleaning and closing. "The house has a medical supply room," Dante said, his voice tight with pain. "Maria keeps it stocked." Down the hall from the kitchen. Isabella found it, came back with everything she needed. Her hands were steady as she cleaned the wound, as she worked with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Dante watched her the entire time, his dark eyes tracking every movement. "You're good at this," he said. "I told you. I was studying to be a nurse. Why'd you stop? Mom got sick. Someone had to work full-time to keep us afloat. School was a luxury we couldn't afford." Her hands paused for just a second, then continued. "After she died, I thought about going back. But Dad needed help with the business. And then the gambling started and, well, here we are." "I'm sorry," Dante said quietly. "For what? For all of it. For your mother. For your father's weakness. For the fact that you're here instead of finishing school and becoming the nurse you wanted to be. For the fact that I'm the reason your life got derailed." Isabella looked up at him, her hand still pressed against his ribs. "You're not the reason. You're just the latest consequence. There's a difference." "Is there?" She reached for the suture kit. "This is going to hurt. I've had worse." "I'm sure you have," she said, and began to close the wound. Dante didn't make a sound, didn't flinch, just kept watching her with those impossible eyes. When she finished, taping a bandage over her work, she started to pull away. His hand caught hers. "Thank you," he said. Isabella looked down at their joined hands. His was large, scarred, marked with violence. Hers was small, soft, marked with nothing but life. They shouldn't fit together, but somehow they did. "You should rest," she said. "So should you." "I will, after I know you're okay." Something shifted in Dante's expression. "I'm always okay, Isabella." "I have to be." "That's not actually true, though, is it?" "Being okay." She sat back, still holding his hand without quite knowing why. "You just got stabbed. You're bleeding and in pain, and pretending neither matters. That's not okay. That's just survival." He was quiet for a long moment. "When I was 15, he said finally, my father took me on my first collection. There was a man who owed money. Not much, maybe 10,000. But he'd been avoiding payment for weeks. My father brought me to teach me a lesson about respect, about power, about consequences." Isabella's stomach clenched, but she didn't pull away. "The man begged," Dante continued, his voice flat. "Said his wife was sick. His kids needed food. All the usual excuses. My father handed me a gun and told me to shoot him. Said it was time I became a man. Did you? Yes. Dante's eyes were distant, seeing something years away. I was terrified. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the gun. But I did it because that's what was expected. That's what being a Moretti meant. And afterward, my father took me for ice cream, like it was a celebration, like I'd just hit a home run instead of killing someone. Isabella felt tears burning in her eyes but forced them back. That wasn't your fault. You were a child. I pulled the trigger. That makes it my fault. But it wasn't your choice. Not really. You were shaped by violence, forced into it. There's a difference between being a monster by choice and being made into one by circumstance. Dante looked at her then, really looked at her. Why aren't you afraid of me? You just admitted to murder. Multiple murders, probably. Why are you sitting here holding my hand instead of running? Isabella considered the question. Because I see you, she said finally. The real you. Not the monster everyone expects. The man who reads philosophy in his library and plays piano when he thinks no one's listening. The man who donates to children's hospitals. The man who promised not to hurt me, and I believe him. You shouldn't believe me. Maybe not. But I do. They sat there in the quiet library, hands still joined, while outside the night slowly gave way to dawn. Something was building between them. Something dangerous and complicated and real. Something that neither of them knew how to name. I should go, Isabella finally said. Let you rest. Stay, Dante said. Then, softer. Please, just for a little while longer. So she stayed. Sat beside him on the couch while he leaned back and closed his eyes. Didn't let go of his hand. Didn't move away when his breathing eventually evened out into sleep. Didn't leave even when Maria found them hours later and raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Because something had shifted tonight. In the space between a wound and the hands that healed it. In the space between truth and the courage to speak it. In the space between a man who'd bought her and a woman who was starting to see past the transaction to something else underneath. Something that looked dangerously like the beginning of understanding. Maybe even the beginning of something more. 3 weeks passed in a strange kind of rhythm. Isabella learned the patterns of the house. Dante left most mornings for business, came back in the evenings, sometimes clean, sometimes bloodied, always exhausted. She learned to keep the medical supplies close, learned which wounds needed stitches and which could be butterflied closed, learned that he trusted her hands more than he trusted the doctors on his payroll. They ate breakfast together when he was home, dinner too sometimes. The conversation started careful, surface level. Weather, books, inconsequential things. But slowly, like water wearing down stone, they began to go deeper. He told her about his mother, who died when he was 8. Not from violence, from a brain aneurysm. There one moment, gone the next. How that was the last time he remembered his father showing anything like grief. She told him about teaching herself to cook from YouTube videos after her mother got too sick to stand at the stove. How she'd burned so many dinners that the smoke detector became a regular dinner-time soundtrack. How she'd finally figured it out and felt like she'd won something important. He told her about the first man who'd tried to overthrow him when he took power at 28. How he'd been expected to make an example, to be as brutal as his father. How instead he'd offered the man a choice. Leave New York forever or die. The man had left. The families had called it weakness. Dante had called it mercy. She told him about the student she'd tutored who couldn't read, a 14-year-old boy who'd fallen through every crack in the system. How she'd worked with him for 2 years, staying late, buying books with her own money, how he'd finally read his first novel cover to cover and cried, how that moment had meant more to her than anything. They were building something, not trust exactly. Trust was too simple a word. It was more like recognition, like two people who'd been shaped by pain finding familiar scars in each other. The first public event came 4 weeks after she'd arrived. A charity gala, black tie, 500 of New York's elite and criminal mixing together in a blur of champagne and corruption. Dante presented her with a dress the color of midnight, silk that poured over her skin like water, diamonds for her ears, her throat, shoes that cost more than her father's monthly rent. She looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. "You look," Dante said from the doorway, then stopped, lost for words. Like property dressed up for display, Isabella finished, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "Like you belong on my arm," he corrected gently. "Like someone who could rule this world if she wanted to. I don't want to. I know. But they don't need to know that." The gala was overwhelming. So many people, all of them watching, whispering, judging. Isabella felt their eyes on her like weights, felt the women's jealousy and the men's speculation, felt the way they looked at Dante with fear and respect and calculation, felt the way they looked at her and wondered what she'd done to earn her place at his side. Dante kept her close, his hand at the small of her back, possessive but not painful, a statement to everyone watching. Mine, protected, untouchable. She met the heads of the other families, Russians with cold eyes and colder smiles, Irish with jokes that had edges, Italians who kissed her hand and looked at Dante like they were trying to find weakness. And through it all, Dante was different, harder. The softness she'd glimpsed in their private moments was gone, replaced by something calculating and dangerous. This was the Don, the devil of Manhattan, the man who controlled an empire built on blood. It should have terrified her. Instead, it made her sad. Sad that he had to be this, that he couldn't just be the man who read in the library and played piano in the dark. They were talking to a Russian named Victor, all sharp suit and sharper instincts, when someone bumped into Isabella, hard enough to make her stumble, hard enough to spill champagne down the front of her dress. The man who'd done it was young, mid-20s, with slicked back hair and a smirk that said he'd done it on purpose. "Oops," he said, not sounding sorry at all. "Should watch where you're going, sweetheart." The temperature around them dropped 10 degrees. Dante moved, fast as a snake. One moment he was beside Isabella. The next, his hand was around the man's throat, slamming him back against the wall. Every conversation in the immediate vicinity stopped. "You want to apologize," Dante said softly. The kind of soft that promised violence. To the lady. Now. The man's smirk vanished, replaced by fear. He choked out something that might have been sorry. Dante held him there for another moment, then released him. The man fled. Around them, conversation slowly resumed, but everyone had seen. Everyone now knew exactly what Isabella meant to Dante Moretti. In the car on the way home, Isabella was quiet. Dante kept glancing at her, concerned. "You're angry," he observed. "I'm thinking. About how you nearly killed a man for spilling champagne on me." He was testing boundaries, showing disrespect. That kind of thing spreads if you don't shut it down immediately. So it was about respect, about your reputation. "It was about you," Dante said flatly, "about making sure everyone in that room understood that touching you, threatening you, even looking at you wrong, has consequences." "That's not protection," Isabella said. "That's possession. Is there a difference in my world?" "Yes," she said. "There has to be. Because if there's not, then I'm just another thing you own. Another asset. Another piece of property. And I can't. Her voice cracked slightly. I can't be that. Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then he told the driver to pull over. They were somewhere in Manhattan, streets still busy despite the late hour. Get out, Dante said. Isabella stared at him. What? Get out of the car. Walk away. I won't stop you. This is your chance, Isabella. You're out. Walk away and I'll make sure your father's debt is forgiven. I'll make sure you're protected. You'll never have to see me again. You can go back to your life. Be free. Isabella's hand was on the door handle. She could do it. Could walk away from this strange, complicated, dangerous situation. Could reclaim her freedom. Could go back to being just Isabella. Not Isabella Moretti's, whatever she was. But as she sat there, hand on the handle, she realized something. She didn't want to. Somewhere in the past 4 weeks, something had changed. The fear had transformed into something else. The resentment had been complicated by understanding. The anger had been softened by seeing the man underneath the monster. I'm not getting out, she said quietly. Isabella, I'm giving you an out. You should take it. Why? She asked, turning to face him. Because you want me to leave. Is that what this is? Because I don't think it is. I think you're testing me, seeing if I'll run the first chance I get, proving to yourself that everyone leaves eventually. Dante's jaw clenched. Maybe I am. So I'm staying, Isabella said. Not because I'm trapped, not because I'm afraid, but because I choose to. That's the difference you're looking for, Dante, between possession and something else. Choice. You're choosing this, he said, like he couldn't quite believe it. Choosing to stay. I'm choosing you, she corrected. The man who reads philosophy and patches up the broken things no one else sees. The man who plays piano at 3 in the morning when the nightmares get too bad. The man who holds my hand when he's bleeding and trusts me to put him back together. I'm choosing him, not the dawn, not the devil, just Dante. Something broke open in his expression, something raw and vulnerable and desperate. He pulled her to him, his hand cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything about his reputation. Can I? He started. Yes, Isabella whispered. He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and hungry and full of all the words neither of them knew how to say. She kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. I'm going to ruin you, he said, but it sounded like a warning and an apology. Maybe, Isabella replied, or maybe you'll save me. Maybe we'll save each other. They went home. Not back to the house. Home. Because somewhere in the past weeks that's what it had become. Not a prison. Not a cage. Just home. That night when Dante came to her room, he didn't come to take. He came to ask. And when Isabella said yes, when she pulled him to her, it was her choice, her decision, her desire. They came together like a storm, all thunder and lightning and rain. He touched her like she was something precious and breakable. She touched him like he was something she wanted to keep. And in the tangle of sheets and limbs and breathless moments, they found something neither had expected to find. Each other. Afterward, lying in the darkness with her head on his chest and his fingers tracing patterns on her back, Dante spoke. I need to tell you something, he said. About your father's debt. Isabella tensed. What about it? It was paid the day you arrived. Completely. Forgiven. He paused. I only agreed to take you because I knew he'd already gambled away his last chance. I knew if I didn't take you, the Russians would, and they wouldn't have been kind. So I took you to protect you, not to own you, to save you. Isabella pushed up on her elbow to look at him. So I've been free this whole time. You've been safe this whole time. There's a difference. But yes, you could have left at any point. Isabella didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So all of this, every rule, every restriction, it was all to protect you. Once the families saw you were mine, you became a target. I had to make sure you were safe, had to make sure no one could get to you. But the payment, the arrangement, was just theater for everyone watching, Dante said. To give them a reason for your presence that they'd understand. But the truth is, he looked at her, and there was something almost shy in his expression. The truth is, I kept you here because from the moment you walked into my office, I couldn't imagine letting you walk out. You terrified me because you made me feel something I thought I'd killed a long time ago. Hope. You used me, Isabella said, but there wasn't anger in her voice, just wonder. I protected you, Dante corrected. And yes, I was selfish. I should have told you the truth from the start, should have given you the choice. But I was afraid you'd leave. And his voice dropped to almost a whisper. I didn't want you to leave. Isabella kissed him, soft and slow and full of understanding. You're an idiot, she said against his lips. A well-intentioned idiot, but still an idiot. I know. Good. Now tell me you love me, so I know I didn't just sleep with a man who only sees me as a protection project. Dante rolled them over, pinning her beneath him. His eyes were intense, burning. I love you, Isabella Romano. I have since that first night when you asked if I wanted the lights on or off, and I realized you were the bravest person I'd ever met. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you see through every wall I've ever built. I love that you chose to stay when I gave you a way out. And I love that you're lying in my bed, in my home, in my life, making me feel like maybe I'm not completely beyond redemption. Isabella felt tears slide down her temples. I love you too, she whispered. You impossible, complicated, beautiful disaster of a man. I love you too. They stayed like that, wrapped in each other, while outside the city that never slept kept turning. But in that room, in that moment, they'd found something the city could never touch. Something real. Something theirs. The next morning, Isabella woke to an empty bed and a note on the pillow. Downstairs. I made breakfast. Don't laugh. She found him in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, attempting to flip pancakes with varying degrees of success. The counter was a disaster zone of flour and eggshells, and what looked like an entire stick of butter. He turned when she entered, and the smile on his face was something she'd never seen before. Unguarded. Young. Happy. I'm trying, he said, gesturing at the chaos. Maria's not here yet, and I wanted to surprise you. You're burning them, I know. But I'm trying. Isabella moved to the stove, gently took the spatula from his hand. Here, she said. Let me show you. They cooked together, her guiding his hands, him listening intently, like she was teaching him the secrets of the universe, instead of just how to not burn pancakes. When they finally sat down to eat, the pancakes were only slightly scorched. Perfect, Dante declared. Best pancakes I've ever made. Only pancakes you've ever made, Isabella corrected. Still counts. Over breakfast, they talked about the future, not in concrete terms, not in promises that might be too heavy to keep, just in possibilities, about what it might look like if she went back to school, about what it might mean if he started stepping back from the more violent parts of the business, about whether love could survive in a world built on blood and money and power, about whether they could build something different, something better. I can't promise you normal, Dante said. My world doesn't work that way. I'll always have enemies. There will always be danger. I don't want normal, Isabella replied. Normal is overrated. I just want real. I want this. You and me, figuring it out as we go. Even when it's hard. Even when it's complicated. Even when your world crashes into mine and everything gets messy. Can you promise me that? He asked. That you'll stay. Even when it gets hard. I can promise I'll choose you, Isabella said. Every day. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. That's all I need, Dante said quietly. Your choice. Every day. Months passed. Isabella did go back to school, online classes for nursing, that Dante insisted on paying for despite her protests. She studied in the library while he worked in his office. Sometimes she'd find him watching her instead of reading his own papers, a soft expression on his face that made her heart skip. The families adjusted to her presence, some with acceptance, others with resentment. But Dante had made his position clear. She was untouchable. She was his. And slowly, carefully, she became more than that. She started to understand the business, not the violent parts. Those Dante kept carefully separate from her. But the legitimate operations, the real estate developments, the investments, the charitable foundations he ran under shell companies. She had ideas. Good ones. About community development. About investing in neighborhoods instead of just extracting from them. About using the family's resources to actually help people instead of just controlling them. Some of the old guard laughed. A nurse playing businesswoman, a woman trying to soften the mob. But Dante listened, and slowly things started to change. Not everything, not fast, but change nonetheless. Isabella met her father again 6 months after she'd left. Dante arranged it, neutral territory, a coffee shop in Queens. Vincent Romano looked smaller than she remembered. Older. The weight of what he'd done had carved lines into his face. Bella, he started, but she held up a hand. I'm not here to forgive you, she said. I'm not sure I can. You traded me like property. You broke something between us that might never fully heal. I know, he whispered. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it. But I'm here to tell you I'm okay, Isabella continued. Better than okay, actually. I'm finishing school. I'm building a life. And I'm with someone who, she paused, someone who sees me, who chose me, not as payment or obligation, but because he wanted to, because he loves me. Is he good to you? Vincent asked. Does he treat you well? He treats me like I matter, Isabella said. Like my choices matter. Like I'm not just an extension of him, but my own person. So yes, Dad, he's good to me. Vincent nodded slowly. Then I'm glad, even though I don't deserve to be glad, even though I have no right to feel relief. I'm glad you found something good in all the mess I created. They didn't hug, didn't make promises to rebuild what was broken. But it was a start, a tiny seed of possibility that maybe, someday, there could be forgiveness. Not forgetting. Never forgetting. But maybe forgiveness. Dante was waiting outside, leaning against the car. He straightened when she emerged. You okay? He asked. I will be, she said, taking his hand. Take me home. Home meant the estate now, but it also meant something bigger. It meant the space they'd carved out together, the life they were building, the future they were creating one choice at a time. That night, they lay in bed, tangled together in the way that had become familiar, comfortable. Right. Tell me something true, Isabella said. It was their game, something they did when the world felt too heavy. Taking turns sharing truths, small and large. Dante was quiet for a moment, his hand stroking through her hair. Sometimes I still have nightmares about the first man I killed, he said. I'm 15 again, and my hands are shaking, and I can see his face. See his eyes. See the moment the light goes out. And I wake up wondering if I ever really had a choice, if I ever could have been anything other than this. Isabella pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. You're making different choices now, she said. That has to count for something. Your turn, he said. Tell me something true. Isabella took a breath. Sometimes I'm scared this won't last, she admitted. That I'll wake up, and you'll have realized I'm just the daughter of a debtor who you felt sorry for. That this feeling between us will fade, and you'll regret keeping me here. That I'm not enough for your world. Dante shifted so he could look at her, his hand cupping her face. You want to know what I'm scared of? He asked. What? That I'll get you killed. That someone will use you to hurt me. That my world will destroy the best thing that's ever happened to me. That I'm selfish for keeping you, when you deserve better than a life lived in the shadows. So we're both scared, Isabella said. Both worried we're not enough. Both afraid of losing this. I guess that means it matters. It means everything, Dante corrected. You're everything. 3 weeks later, on a quiet Tuesday morning, Dante called an unprecedented meeting. Every family head, every captain, everyone who mattered in New York's underworld. They gathered at a neutral location, confused and wary. And Dante brought Isabella. She wore a simple black dress, no diamonds this time, just herself. This is Isabella Romano, Dante said, his voice carrying through the room. You all know her as he paused. But that's not what she is. She's not my possession. She's not my weakness. She's my partner, my equal. And moving forward, when you deal with me, you deal with her. The room erupted. Voices raised in protest and shock. A woman, in the family's business. It was unheard of, unthinkable, unacceptable. Dante let them shout. Then he raised his hand, and silence fell. I'm not asking for permission, he said quietly. I'm telling you how things are going to be. The Moretti family is evolving. We're keeping our territory, keeping our power. But we're changing how we use it. And Isabella is leading that change. If that's a problem for any of you, speak now. No one spoke, because challenging Dante Moretti was a death sentence, and everyone in that room knew it. Over the following months, Isabella proved herself. She negotiated deals the old men thought impossible. She found common ground where there'd only been conflict. She brought a perspective that none of them had considered, not because she was soft, but because she understood something they'd forgotten. That power without purpose was just violence. That respect earned was stronger than respect taken. That building, something that lasted, required more than fear. Not everyone accepted her. Some of the old guard never would. But enough did. Enough saw that the way forward wasn't more blood, but more strategy, more intelligence, more humanity. A year after she'd walked through Dante's door as payment for a debt, Isabella stood in front of a graduating class. Her graduating class. She'd finished her nursing degree online, top of her class, while simultaneously helping run a criminal empire. The juxtaposition wasn't lost on her. Dante was there in the audience, surrounded by guards but trying to blend in. When her name was called, and she walked across that stage, she saw him stand, saw the pride on his face, saw the love that he no longer tried to hide. After the ceremony, he pulled her into his arms. I'm so proud of you, he said into her hair. You did this. While managing everything else, dealing with my world, you still did this. It matters to me, Isabella said simply. Helping people, healing, it's who I am. I know, Dante said. It's one of the reasons I love you. That night, back at the estate, Dante led her to the library. There was a bottle of champagne waiting, 2 glasses, and something small wrapped in velvet. What's this? Isabella asked. An ending, Dante said. And a beginning. He handed her the velvet package. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing a folded piece of paper. It was the original contract, the one her father had signed, trading her for his debt. Dante had kept it all this time. "I want you to burn it," he said. "What?" "That contract, every piece of paper that says you were ever anything but free, I want you to burn it. I want there to be no record, no reminder, no shadow of how this started. I want us to begin again. Fresh, with nothing between us but choice." Isabella stared at the paper in her hands. This piece of paper had changed her entire life, had brought her here, to this moment, to this man. Part of her wanted to keep it, a reminder of how far she'd come. But Dante was right. The past was the past. What mattered was what they chose now. She walked to the fireplace. Dante followed, standing beside her as she held the contract over the flames. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. "About staying, about us?" "None," she said. "You. Only that I can't go back and do it differently. Can't erase the fact that you were hurt, that your freedom was taken, that you had to fight so hard to find yourself again in all of this. But you gave me that," Isabella said, looking at him, "the chance to find myself, to become someone stronger, someone who knows what she wants and isn't afraid to fight for it. So no regrets." She dropped the contract into the flames. They watched it burn together, the paper curling and blackening, the words that had bound them dissolving into ash. When it was gone completely, Dante turned to her. "Isabella Romano," he said, and there was something nervous in his voice now, something vulnerable. "We started this the wrong way, with obligation and debt and circumstances that neither of us chose. But somewhere in the middle of surviving together, I fell in love with you. With your strength and your kindness, and your absolute refusal to be anything less than exactly who you are." He pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it to reveal a ring. Simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the firelight. "I can't promise you an easy life. Can't promise that my past won't haunt us, or that my enemies won't always be a threat. Can't promise normal, or simple, or safe. But I can promise you choice. Every day, I will choose you. I will choose us. I will choose the life we're building together. And I'm asking, hoping, that you'll choose the same. Marry me. Not because of debt or obligation or circumstance, but because you want to, because you love me, because you believe we can keep building something real together." Isabella was crying now, tears streaming down her face. But she was smiling too. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you. Not because I have to, because I want to, because I love you, because you're mine the same way I'm yours. By choice. Always by choice." Dante slid the ring onto her finger with trembling hands. Then he kissed her, deep and long and full of promise. When they pulled apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "We're going to have an extraordinary life," he promised. "It won't be perfect. There will be challenges and darkness and moments when the weight of my world threatens to crush us. But we'll face it together." "Always together," Isabella agreed. The wedding happened 3 months later. Small, intimate, just the people who mattered. Maria cried through the entire ceremony. The few family members who'd come to accept Isabella attended with genuine smiles. And Vincent Romano sat in the back, tears streaming down his face, watching his daughter marry a man who loved her fiercely and completely. Not because he'd bought her, but because she'd chosen him. Isabella wore white, simple and elegant. Dante wore black, because some things about him would never change. But when he looked at her, walking down the aisle, there was nothing dark in his expression. just light, just love, just hope. The priest, who'd been carefully selected for his willingness to overlook certain aspects of the groom's profession, spoke about love and commitment and choice, about two people building a life together despite the odds, about finding light in darkness. And when Dante said "I do," his voice was steady and sure. When Isabella said "I do," hers was just as strong. They sealed their vows with a kiss that made several of the older family members uncomfortable with its intensity, but neither of them cared. They were married, bound by choice, not obligation, by love, not debt. The reception was held at the estate, transformed for the night into something magical. Lights strung through the gardens, music floating on the warm summer air, food and wine and laughter. Dante and Isabella danced, their first dance as husband and wife, and the way he held her, the way he looked at her, made it clear to everyone watching that this was real. This was love. This was a man who would burn the world down before he let anything hurt the woman in his arms. Later, when the guests had mostly departed and the night was winding down, they stood together on the terrace overlooking the grounds. "I never thought I'd have this," Dante said quietly. "A wife I love, a home that feels like more than just a fortress, a future that's about building something instead of just maintaining power." "You have it now," Isabella said, leaning into him. "We have it." He turned to look at her, and there was something raw in his expression. "Thank you," he said, "for staying, for choosing me, for showing me that I could be more than what I was raised to be." "Thank you for seeing me," Isabella replied, "for making me feel like I matter, for building a life with me instead of just keeping me in one." They kissed as the last of the guests left, and the night settled around them. And in that moment, standing together on the terrace of a house that had once been a prison, but was now a home, they both felt it. The weight of the past lifting. The possibility of the future opening up. The knowledge that whatever came next, they'd face it together. Two people who'd found each other in the darkest of circumstances and had chosen to create light. Months turned into years. The Moretti Empire continued to evolve under their joint leadership. Dante stepped back from the most violent aspects, delegating to trusted captains. Isabella opened a free clinic in one of the neighborhoods they controlled, using family resources to actually help people. They had their share of challenges, enemies who tested their resolve, internal conflicts from those who resented the changes, moments when the weight of Dante's past threatened to overwhelm them, but they faced it all together, through Isabella's first miscarriage and the grief that followed, through an assassination attempt that left Dante in the hospital for 3 weeks and Isabella sleeping in a chair beside his bed every night, through the slow, painful process of trying to build something good from a foundation of violence. They had their victories too. The clinic expanded to 3 locations. Crime rates dropped in neighborhoods where they invested in community programs instead of just collecting protection money. Dante was approached by federal prosecutors about turning state's evidence. He refused, but the fact that he was seen as someone worth turning suggested that not everyone saw him as just a monster anymore. 5 years after their wedding, Isabella stood in the clinic, finishing up with a patient, an elderly woman with diabetes who couldn't afford her medication. Isabella made sure she left with a 3-month supply, paid for by the foundation. The woman cried, thanking her. Isabella just smiled and said that's what community means, taking care of each other. Dante was waiting outside, leaning against the car. He did that sometimes, just showed up to drive her home. Remnants of his need to protect her, to know she was safe. She didn't mind. "Good day," he asked as she approached. "Long day," she corrected, "but good. You, productive. Boring meetings about shipping logistics. Nothing exploded. Nothing caught fire. I call that a win. They drove home through the city they'd claimed as theirs. Not through violence, not anymore, but through choice, through building something that lasted. At home, they found Maria had prepared dinner. The older woman had become something like family. Had watched their relationship evolve from transaction to love with knowing eyes. She set plates in front of them, then paused. "There's something you should know," she said. "Your father called. Isabella. Vincent. He's in the hospital. Heart attack. Not bad, but not good either." Isabella felt Dante's hand find hers under the table. "Do you want to go see him?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," Isabella admitted. "Part of me thinks he doesn't deserve it. Part of me knows I'll regret it if I don't." "Then we go," Dante said simply. "Together." They visited Vincent in the hospital that night. He looked old and small in the hospital bed, hooked up to machines that beeped and whirred. When he saw Isabella, his eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," he said, like he'd been saving those words for years. "For everything. For what I did. For being weak. For costing you your freedom." "You didn't cost me my freedom," Isabella said, surprising herself. "You put me in a situation I never should have been in. Yes, you hurt me in ways that took years to heal. But I found my freedom anyway. Found myself. Found love. Found a life worth living. So I'm going to thank you for being selfish, because your weakness led me to my strength." Vincent sobbed then, broken and relieved. Isabella held his hand, Dante standing behind her, solid and supporting. And in that hospital room, years after everything had changed, Isabella found something she'd thought was lost forever. Forgiveness. Not the forgetting kind, the kind that acknowledged the hurt but chose to release it anyway. The kind that said, "I'm moving forward and you're not invited to be a burden anymore." Vincent recovered. Not fully. Never fully. But enough. And on Sundays sometimes, he'd come to the estate for dinner. Dante would cook, Isabella would laugh at his attempts, and Maria would save the day when everything burned. And Vincent would sit at their table, part of the family he'd broken, and that had somehow reformed around the cracks. 7 years after that rainy night when she'd first walked through Dante's door, Isabella gave birth to a daughter. They named her Grace, because that's what she was. Grace they hadn't earned but had been given anyway. Grace in the form of new life, new hope, new possibilities. Dante held his daughter for the first time with hands that had dealt so much death, and cried. "She's perfect," he whispered. "Like her mother." "She's ours," Isabella corrected. "Like us." They raised Grace in a world that was slowly changing. Dante continued to step back from the darkness, building legitimate businesses, using the family's power for good. He'd never be clean, not completely. The blood on his hands would never fully wash away. But he could build something better for his daughter. Could show her that people could change. That love could redeem. That choice mattered. Isabella continued her work at the clinics, expanding the foundation's reach. She became known in the community, not as the mob boss's wife, but as the woman who actually cared, who showed up, who made a difference. When Grace was 3, she asked her father what he did for work. "Daddy builds things," Dante said, which was true in its way. "What kind of things?" "Important things. Things that help people. Things that last." He looked at Isabella over their daughter's head. And she saw the truth in his eyes. He was building a legacy, not the kind his father had built, measured in fear and violence, but one measured in change, in redemption, in the slow, hard work of being better. Sometimes late at night, when Grace was sleeping and the house was quiet, Dante and Isabella would sit together in the library. The same room where she'd first stitched his wounds, where they'd first been honest with each other, where they'd started to build something real. "Tell me something true," Isabella would say, and Dante would answer, sometimes with confessions about the darkness he still carried, sometimes with gratitude for the light she'd brought, sometimes with simple words of love. Then she'd share her truth about her fears and hopes and dreams, about the way loving him had changed her, about how she wouldn't go back and change a single thing, even the hard parts, because it all led to this, to them, to Grace, to home. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they returned to that coffee shop in Soho, the one where they'd first met, though the circumstances of that meeting had been carefully rewritten in their public story. "It's still here," Isabella said, looking around at the worn tables and mismatched chairs. "Still perfect," Dante agreed. They sat at a table in the corner, ordered coffee, and just existed together in the space where their story had begun. "Do you remember what I asked you that night?" Dante said. "About the lights." Isabella smiled. "I remember everything about that night. The rain, the fear, the way you looked at me like you were seeing something you hadn't expected." "I was," Dante said. "I was seeing my future. I just didn't know it yet. And now, he reached across the table to take her hand. Now I know I was right. You are my future. You and Grace. This life we've built. This family we've created. It's everything I never knew I needed." Isabella felt tears threaten but smiled through them. "We've come a long way from that night. A long way from debt and obligation, from transactions and fear. We have. But you know what?" "What?" "I'd do it all again," Dante said. "Every hard moment, every obstacle, every challenge. I'd do it all again just to end up here. With you. With our daughter. With this life." "Me too," Isabella whispered. "Even the hard parts. Me too." They finished their coffee and walked out into the New York night. The city glittered around them, full of possibility and danger in equal measure. But they walked through it together. Hands linked, stronger together than they'd ever been apart. Two people who'd found each other in the darkness, who'd chosen to create light, who'd learned that love wasn't about perfect circumstances or easy choices. It was about showing up every day, about choosing each other when it would be easier to walk away, about building something that lasted through the storms. Years continued to pass. Grace grew into a thoughtful child with her mother's green eyes and her father's intensity. She was raised in both worlds, seeing the legitimate business side of her father's empire and the community care work of her mother's clinics. She understood, in the way children do, that her family was different, that Daddy's work was complicated, that their life required guards and security and careful awareness. But she also knew she was loved. Fiercely, completely, unconditionally. When Grace was 8, she asked Isabella a question over breakfast. "Mommy, how did you and Daddy meet?" Isabella glanced at Dante, who raised an eyebrow. They'd always known this question would come. "We met in a coffee shop," Isabella said, which was true. It was raining, and I needed somewhere dry to wait out the storm. And Daddy was there. "And Daddy saw your mother," Dante added, picking up the story, and thought she was the most beautiful, brave person he'd ever seen. So he talked to her. And Mommy talked back, Isabella continued. And we discovered we liked each other, even though we were very different, especially because we were different, Dante corrected gently. Your mother taught me that being different from someone doesn't mean you can't understand them. It just means you have more to learn from each other. Did you fall in love right away? Grace asked. No, Isabella said honestly. Love took time. We had to learn to trust each other first, had to be honest with each other, had to choose each other every day until choosing became as natural as breathing. That sounds hard, Grace observed with the blunt honesty of children. It was, Dante agreed. The best things usually are. But your mother was worth it. Is worth it. Will always be worth it. Grace seemed satisfied with this answer and returned to her cereal. Isabella met Dante's eyes across the table and saw the relief there. They'd told the truth, just not all of it. Someday, Grace would be old enough to understand the full story. The debt, the arrangement, the complicated beginning. But for now, she knew the important part. That her parents loved each other. That they'd worked hard to build their relationship. That love was a choice they made every day. That afternoon, Isabella received a call. One of her clinic patients, a young woman she'd been helping, had been rushed to the hospital. Complications from an infection. It was bad. Isabella grabbed her bag, already heading for the door. Dante appeared, keys in hand. "I'll drive." "You might be needed here," Isabella started. He cut her off with a look. "You're needed there. I'm needed with you. Always with you." At the hospital, they discovered the young woman needed surgery she couldn't afford. Isabella didn't hesitate. The foundation would cover it. All of it. Whatever it took. The woman's sister, barely 20 years old, broke down crying. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this for us? You don't even know us." "Because someone once made a choice that changed my life," Isabella said gently. "And I learned that sometimes the choices we make for others, especially when they cost us something, those are the ones that matter most. So I'm choosing to help. Because I can. Because you need it. Because that's what we do for each other." The surgery was successful. The young woman recovered. And as they left the hospital late that night, Dante pulled Isabella close. "You're extraordinary, you know that. I'm just trying to do some good." "You are good," he corrected. "You always have been. Even when my world tried to corrupt you, tried to make you hard and cold and calculating, you stayed good. You stayed you. And you inspired me to be better." "We inspired each other," Isabella said. "That's what love does. Makes us want to be the best versions of ourselves." For each other, and for the world. They drove home through the city, and Isabella thought about how far they'd come. From that rainy night when she'd been payment for a debt to this moment, driving home to their daughter after helping save someone's life. She thought about all the choices they'd made along the way, the hard ones and the easy ones, the ones that had cost them and the ones that had paid dividends in unexpected ways. Every choice had led them here, to this life, this love, this family, and she wouldn't change a single one. When Grace was 12, she started asking harder questions about her father's business, about the family's reputation, about the whispers at school, the way some parents wouldn't let their kids come over for playdates. "Daddy," she said one evening, "am I part of the Mafia?" Dante set down the book he'd been reading. "Where did you hear that word?" "At school. Kids say things. Say you're a criminal. Say our family is dangerous." He looked at Isabella, who nodded encouragingly. Grace deserved the truth. "Come here," he said. Grace came and sat beside him on the couch. "I need to tell you some things that are hard to hear. But things you're old enough to understand now," he explained, as gently as possible, about the family business, about the history of violence and crime, about the world he'd been born into, not chosen, about the choices he'd made, both good and bad, about the man he'd been and the man he was trying to become. Grace listened, her young face serious. "So you have hurt people?" "Yes." "Have you killed people?" Dante took a breath. "Yes." Grace was quiet for a long moment. "But you're trying to be better now." "Every day," Dante said. "I can't change my past. can't undo the things I've done, but I can choose who I am now. And I'm choosing to be a man who protects instead of destroys, who builds instead of tears down, who loves his family more than he loves power. Does Mommy know? Everything. And she loves you anyway. Your mother, Dante said, his voice rough with emotion. Your mother sees all of me, the darkness and the light, the monster and the man. And she chose me anyway. She chooses me still, every single day. That's what real love is, Grace. Seeing someone completely and loving them, not despite their flaws, but with full knowledge of them. Grace thought about this. I love you too, Daddy, even if you made bad choices before. I love who you are now, who you're trying to be. Dante pulled his daughter close, tears streaming down his face. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for giving me a chance to be better, for believing I can be. Isabella watched from the doorway, her own tears falling. This moment, this honesty, this love, this was what they'd built. A family where truth mattered, where past mistakes didn't define the future, where love was stronger than legacy. As Grace grew into her teenage years, she began to see her parents not just as mom and dad, but as two people who'd fought for their relationship, who'd chosen each other against all odds, who'd built something real from the most imperfect beginning. She saw her father's transformation, the way he'd stepped back from violence, the way he worked tirelessly to legitimize the family business, the way he still had enemies, but fought them with lawyers instead of guns. The way he was trying, truly trying, to leave her a better legacy than the one he'd inherited. She saw her mother's strength, the way she'd turned trauma into purpose, the way she'd refused to be broken by circumstances, the way she loved fiercely and demanded honesty, and built communities that actually helped people. And she understood that love wasn't a fairy tale. It was work and choice and commitment, even when things were hard. When Grace was 16, she asked to work at the clinics. She wanted to help people the way her mother did. Isabella taught her daughter how to care for others, how to see beyond circumstances to the person underneath, how to offer dignity along with help, how to build bridges instead of walls. Dante taught Grace about business, about strategy, about using power responsibly, about the weight of choices and the importance of thinking beyond immediate gains to long-term consequences. Together, they taught her about love, about choosing each other, about building something that lasted. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Isabella and Dante renewed their vows. Grace stood as their witness, now a young woman herself, watching her parents promise again to choose each other, to love each other, to keep building their life together. The ceremony was different this time, no shadow of the past hanging over it, no debt or obligation, just two people who'd walked through fire together and come out stronger. I take you, Dante said, his voice steady and sure. Again, still, always. I choose you every day. I will choose you every day for the rest of my life. I take you, Isabella said. My partner, my love, my home. I choose you. I will always choose you. They kissed, and everyone watching could see it. The depth of their love, the strength of their bond, the beauty of what they'd built together. Later, at the reception, Vincent approached them. He was elderly now, his health fragile, but his eyes were clear. I need to say something, he said. Both of you. 20 years ago, I made the worst decision of my life. I traded my daughter because I was weak and desperate and selfish. And somehow, impossibly, that terrible choice led to this. He gestured around the room, to love, to family, to redemption. I don't deserve forgiveness for what I did, but I'm grateful every day that somehow good came from my evil, that Isabella found love even though I tried to sell her freedom, that Dante found redemption even though I saw him as just another criminal. That grace exists because two people refuse to let circumstances define them. Dante extended his hand. We've all made choices we regret, Vincent. The question is what we do after, how we move forward, how we try to be better. Vincent shook his hand, tears streaming down his weathered face. Thank you for loving my daughter, for giving her the life she deserves, for being the man I never could be. Isabella hugged her father, something she hadn't done in years. We're okay, Dad. We're all okay. And we're going to keep being okay. That night, after all the guests had left and Grace had gone to bed, Isabella and Dante stood together on the terrace. The same place they'd stood on their wedding night, the same place they'd stood so many nights over the years, watching the city, talking about their day, just being together. 20 years, Isabella said. Can you believe it? Some days it feels like a lifetime, Dante replied. Other days it feels like we just met. Like I'm still that man seeing you for the first time and feeling my whole world shift. I'm not the same person I was, Isabella said. You changed me, made me stronger, braver, more certain of who I am and what I want. You were always that person, Dante said. I just gave you space to discover it. What about you? Isabella asked. Are you the same person? God, no, Dante said with feeling. That man was lost, broken, convinced he was nothing but a monster. You showed me I could be more, that I could choose to be more. That redemption was possible even for someone like me. We saved each other, Isabella said. Isn't that what the best love does? Saves us from ourselves, makes us better than we could be alone. Dante pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind. They stood like that, looking out at the city that had been the backdrop to their entire story. I love you, Isabella Romano Moretti. I love you with everything I am, everything I was, everything I'll ever be. You are my redemption, my purpose, my home. I love you, Dante Moretti, Isabella replied. You are my choice. Today, tomorrow, forever. You are my proof that people can change, that love can transform, that even the darkest beginning can lead to light. They stayed there as the night deepened around them, two people who'd found each other in the most impossible circumstances, who'd chosen each other when they could have walked away, who'd built a life and a love that had survived everything thrown at it. From the window above, Grace watched her parents, saw the way they held each other, saw the love that radiated between them even after 20 years, and she understood what they'd been trying to teach her all along. Love wasn't about perfect circumstances. It was about imperfect people making a perfect choice, to stay, to fight, to build, to choose each other every single day, no matter what. It was about seeing someone completely, darkness and light, flaws and beauty, past and potential, and saying yes, I choose you. And somewhere in the night, in a city that never slept, in a house that had once been a prison but had become a home, 3 hearts beat in rhythm. A family built from the most imperfect beginning, a love that had transformed debt into devotion, an ending that was really just another beginning, because that's what love does. It transforms, it redeems, it saves. And if you're brave enough to let it in, if you're strong enough to choose it every day, it creates miracles. Sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin in the darkest places. Sometimes being seen is the greatest gift we can give or receive. Sometimes choosing to stay when you could leave is the bravest thing you'll ever do. And sometimes, just sometimes, love really does conquer all. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and become a member to get early access to upcoming stories. And if you felt it was really worth listening to, click the super thanks button. Your support helps us continue bringing narratives about love that transforms, hope that endures, and the beautiful truth that we all deserve to be chosen. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing that love, real love, still exists.